Hello everyone. This is the Traditionalist, and today, once again, we will be talking about Justin Trudeau. So as many of you know, my last video, which was made around 5 months ago, basically at the beginning of my university in September, I made another video about why Justin Trudeau sucks right before the election that we had last year. And I actually did make another video, I think that was in December, where I was reacting to Jimmy Fallon's song about getting the booster for Christmas, but of course that video got immediately taken down by YouTube, and so that's why this Justin Trudeau video is the last video that you see on my channel. So before we get into really the topic of this video, I really want to say that this is probably going to be the most important video I've ever made, and this is a very serious moment because I am a Canadian and our country might be heading towards a dictatorship right now as we speak, and of course I will get into that a little more in the rest of the video. But I mean, this is not one of the videos you want to skip. Some of my videos, of course, are less important, but this one is very important and serious. So I'd please ask you to watch the entire video because I've never seen anything like this happen in my life. All right, so a bit of context. So as many of you guys know, I have made 3 videos already about how Justin Trudeau sucks. I made 2 of them around the election in 2019, and then I made another one just recently in the most recent election. And so as you can tell, I really don't like this guy. He is for sure the worst prime minister we ever had, and he's a terrible prime minister. But if you want to know more, just watch those videos. I guess this in a way is a follow-up, so it's part 4, but it's not really, because of course this is going to be more focused on the Freedom Convoy in Canada. And so this isn't really about Justin Trudeau, but of course, as the Prime Minister, he will be mentioned here. Alright, so that was a really long introduction, and so let's get to the video. So of course, as we all know, the Freedom Convoy is a series of ongoing protests and blockades in Canada against the COVID-19 vaccine mandates and restrictions. The convoy was originally created to protest vaccine mandates for crossing the US border, but later evolved into a protest about COVID-19 restrictions in general. Alright, so how did this all happen? Well, let's go back to the fall of 2021, right, as I made my last video, and at that time, both Canada and the United States had accommodated unvaccinated cross-border truckers, exempting them from COVID-19 vaccine requirements to prevent exacerbating existing supply chain disruptions, which in reality they created themselves, but we'll not get into that. The exemptions for Canadian truckers, though, ended on January 15th, 2022, and I'm recording this on February 15th, 2022, so this was exactly a month ago. And the US also ended its exemption a week later. So an estimated 12,000 to 16,000 of these Canadian truckers who are unvaccinated will not be able to work cross-border routes. So, beginning on January 22nd, hundreds of vehicles formed convoys from several points and traversed Canadian provinces before converging on Ottawa on January 29th, 2022 with a rally at Parliament Hill. The vehicular convoys were then joined by thousands of pedestrian protesters. Of course, these protests are ongoing, and they have stated that they will not leave until all COVID restrictions and mandates have been repealed. So, the first convoy left Prince Rupert on January 22nd, arriving in Prince George in the evening. The next day, another convoy left from Delta with supporters gathering along Highway 1, the Trans-Canada Highway. Now, of course, it didn't take very long for the government to immediately start cracking down on these people's freedoms, and just mere days later, on the 28th, the province of Nova Scotia banned gatherings along highways, specifically on the Trans-Canada Highway 104 between the Nova Scotia-New Brunswick border, in relation to the protests. So, the protests also raised quite a bit of money. The GoFundMe raised over 5 million Canadian dollars just by January 25th. And the previous day, GoFundMe had responded to questions by CTV News, stating funds would not be distributed until the fundraising organizers could show how the funds would be properly distributed. On the 27th, it released the initial $1 million of the funds after organizers had provided that plan. However, of course, on the evening of February 4th, GoFundMe removed the campaign permanently for apparently violating their terms of service, which, as we know in this day, is just having an opinion that the mainstream media and the political left does not like. Because, of course, it always seems to be the people who don't agree with the media and the global homo regime who always seem to be the ones getting censored and the ones who don't follow the terms of service, even though lots of other groups, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, etc., they, of course, never have their funding restricted and they somehow always follow the terms of service. Anyways, Politico reported that, quote, American far-right commentators Dan Bongino and Ben Shapiro, yes, guys, Ben Shapiro, we all know him as just that anti-Semitic Nazi guy. He just hates Jews so much. Wow, yeah. Ben Shapiro is so far right. Anyways, these two were among those directing support to the Canadian movement's crowdfunding websites. And according to Politico again, white supremacist channels on Telegram shared the link. So guys, let's get this straight. So a couple of white supremacists shared a link on Telegram. And this is supposed to be a big deal, not because obviously I support white supremacists because, you know, they suck. But it's like sharing, just because a couple of idiots shared a link on Telegram, which not that many people use anyways. How does this prove that this is a white supremacist movement? Anyways, this is ridiculous. And all you have to do is really just look at the actual people in the movement. A lot of them are not white, so it's pretty stupid. So, of course, how has the government reacted? Well, of course, Justin Trudeau famously has called these people dangerous extremists and a fringe minority.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country.
Now, Erin O'Toole, who has a, aptly fitting name, being just a tool of the left, the leader of the official opposition, although in reality he doesn't oppose anything Trudeau does, and the Conservative Party, as the convoy started, initially declined to support the protest, which again is not surprising at all since he basically agrees with everything that the Liberals stand for. And he said instead the best way to maintain supply chains is for truckers to just get vaccinated. Well, if they just wanted to get vaccinated, they wouldn't even be protesting in the first place. Then later he said he'd meet with the protesters but would not participate or attend their protests. Okay, so what's the point of doing that? Then he later condemned the protesters for desecrating the war memorials on Parliament Hill, which, to be honest, that is a pretty jerk thing to do. But he has been very wishy-washy. He cares more about what the Liberals think about him than his own party. And funnily enough, on February 2nd, he got removed as the party leader, which is good because he was a complete joke of a leader. And he was the main reason, in my opinion, why the Conservatives did not win the last election. So, unlike the Conservative Party, sorry, I keep messing it up. The People's Party leader, Maxime Bernier, Ontario Party leader Derek Sloan, and Independent Ontario Member of Parliament Randy Hillier, all people who actually care about our country and are actually conservative, basically the only real parties left, they expressed support for the convoy protest, and they organized a rally in Waterloo on January the 23rd, supporting the convoy, at which Bernier and Hillier both spoke. Bernier also attended the January 29th event at Parliament Hill and criticized Erin O'Toole for not attending. This is pretty savage. So, of course, as we know, by January 29th, all the truckers had arrived in Ottawa. And so what happened? What did Justin Trudeau do to deal with the protest? Did he negotiate? Did he come up with some sort of deal? Did he try to? No, of course he didn't. He just was moved to, quote unquote, an undisclosed location due to security concerns. Ah, yes, because this is what all normal democratic leaders do. When someone opposes them, they immediately go into hiding and then start calling their opponents extremes. Oh wait, never mind, that's just what third world dictators do. But apparently, Justin Trudeau being the son of Fidel Castro, actually this is not that much as... Anyways, I'll move on from that. So then the Algonquins of Pequot-Kanagan First Nation, whose traditional unceded territory includes the city of Ottawa. Yeah, that's not true. I mean, if they want their territory back, they can go and fight us and take it. But otherwise, yeah, it's not their territory. They issued a statement condemning protesters who held an indigenous pipe ceremony and set up a teepee in the city's Confederation Park without their permission. I mean, guys, it's like, you don't control this area. This is not your country. And by not your country, I don't mean like you don't belong here, but I mean like you don't have legal authority to tell people what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, because yeah, you don't own the land anymore. So anyways, yeah, they got mad because they did this pipe ceremony. I mean, like, saying that you are appropriating, and this is another, I mean, I'm not going to get too much into cultural appropriation because it's just so stupid, but saying like, oh yeah, you're not allowed to use a teepee and, use a pipe ceremony is like, okay, if we really take that, then by that logic, also you're not allowed to wear jeans or pants or anything else. So it's really ridiculous. Last time I checked, teepees are not like copyrighted, like trademark Native American. It's not like, you have a patent on that thing where only you can use it. So it's pretty stupid. But in all honesty, even though this is kind of dumb, in the end this won't actually make a difference. So this is not what's important. What is important though is that on January 31st at a press conference, the Ottawa Police Service Chief Peter Slowly described the demonstration as unique in nature, massive in scale, polarizing in context, and dangerous in literally every other aspect of the event itself. I mean, okay, again, I don't agree with him with that, but that's understandable. But then he, and wait for this, warned offenders that if they had come from elsewhere and committed a crime, including hate crime in Ottawa, there have been intelligence officers, investigative officers, and multi-jurisdictional support from across Canada at work in the background. And he said, quote, no matter where you live, no matter where your vehicles are registered, you will be investigated. We will look for you. We will charge you. If necessary, we will arrest you. And we will pursue prosecutions against you. Oh, well, okay, thank you, comrade. It's good to know all this stuff. Now, again, notice that he said, if you commit crimes, including hate crimes. Just remember, guys, obviously, if you commit a crime, you should go to jail for it, or at least get investigated. But a hate crime, that is not a thing. A hate crime is like hate speech. It is literally just everything that the government, the mainstream media, and the regime doesn't approve on. Because, of course, there's no real way of defining hate, and so hate crimes is just anything that someone thinks is hateful, which, of course, is easily abused, and we see this going on again and again and again and again. Well, at least our premier, Doug Ford, has stood up. No, of course he didn't. Even though he's a so-called conservative, on February 11th, he declared a state of emergency, introducing new legal sanctions on the impediment of trade routes, highways, airports, ports, bridges, and railways. And while Justin Trudeau was too scared to even meet the protesters in his own capital, he had no problem speaking to Joe Biden, though, on the very same day to discuss ending blockades at the border. And this is the really important part, and this is the most important part of this entire video, because this is the reason why I'm making this video. So last night, February 14th, so Valentine's Day, Trudeau met with his Liberal caucus and discussed invoking the Emergencies Act, which would give police extraordinary powers to handle the ongoing protests. And after he did that, he actually did invoke this Emergencies Act, making it the first time in all of our history that this has ever happened. Now, while he insisted that the military would not be deployed, and listen to this part, Emergency Preparedness Minister Bill Blair did not rule out military deployment and called the lack of enforcement by Ottawa police inexplicable. So guys, here we have it. Yesterday, this guy, our emergency preparedness minister, which I had no idea even existed, but this guy literally said that it is not out of question that the military could be used to attack these protesters. So, a bunch of peaceful protesters who just want to have the freedom to choose whether to be vaccinated or not are now possibly going to be attacked by the military. Now, guys, who did this before? Which other leader, when they had their authority questioned, invoked an emergency act and then took all the power for himself? I wonder who that could be. I think it was like some Austrian painter who later started a world war or something. I can't remember who that is anyways. But, of course, we know for sure that it is not a common thing for dictators to invoke emergency acts to give themselves more power every time someone threatens it. But, anyways, what makes this even more, I won't even want to say funny, but ironic, is the fact that this Emergencies Act replaced the former War Measures Act, which was famously invoked by Justin Trudeau's father, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. Oh, how interesting. And he deployed the Canadian forces against a violent separatist group during the 1970 October crisis. So like father, like son. 50 years later, this guy is doing the exact same thing his father did. I mean, of course, he hasn't sent in the military yet, but it is a distinct possibility. And although I'm not going to predict that it's going to happen, if it does happen, I will not be surprised. But he invoked the Emergencies Act, and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland said that under the act, and this is important, protesters' trucks can be seized, their corporate accounts frozen, and vehicles insurance suspended. And so for a little more of an in-depth look at what these Emergencies Act consequences will actually be, take a look at this clip from Tucker Carlson.
There's no outcry from our political class as their friend Justin Trudeau declared martial law in response to an entirely peaceful protest from his country's working class. Our news media barely noted that it happened. Weirdest of all, the State Department, which exists these days to denounce such attackers of democracy as Hungary and Poland, didn't say a single word as democracy in Canada ended. So with that in mind, you should know that Justin Trudeau is no longer the Prime Minister of Canada. Justin Trudeau is Canada's maximum leader. It's strongman, it's caudillo, it's potentate. Justin Trudeau is the dictator of Canada. If you think that's an overstatement, try to think of another way to describe what Justin Trudeau is now doing. For the first time in Canada's history, Trudeau has invoked what's known as the Emergencies Act, though the protests he is facing hardly qualify as an emergency. But suddenly, Justin Trudeau has the power to crush all political opposition to his rule, and that's exactly what he's doing. Trudeau has ended free speech in Canada. He's banned free assembly. Trudeau's government has shut down political rallies and arrested his political critics without probable cause. Trudeau has instituted internal passports that restrict travel within Canada to the politically obedient. Canadians are no longer allowed to leave their own country unless they obey Justin Trudeau. And if they don't obey, they could be bankrupted and destroyed. He now has the power to do that. Trudeau has claimed the power to freeze the financial assets of any Canadian who resists him. No court order is required to do this. He just decides. Justin Trudeau can even dictate what you do for a living and how you do it. Today, Trudeau threatened to arrest tow truck drivers who refused to tow the trucks of protesters. Is this really about stopping the spread of coronavirus? No one in Canada is even pretending that it is anymore. Trudeau himself didn't mention the risk of COVID a single time yesterday. He's not worried about unvaccinated truckers spreading a virus. Trudeau is worried about Canadians resisting his rule. And that's why Trudeau's government announced yesterday they plan to regulate cryptocurrency forever. Watch.
The illegal blockades have highlighted the fact that crowdfunding platforms and some of the payment service providers they use are not fully captured under the Proceeds of Crime and Terrorist Financing Act.
Oh, the Terrorist Financing Act. So that was a law passed to defeat al-Qaeda. Now it's being used to stop law-abiding Canadians, middle-class people, students, truck drivers, from protecting their earnings from the total mismanagement of Canada's central bank. Justin Trudeau has wrecked the Canadian economy, but thanks to the Terrorist Financing Act, there is no escape from the consequences. Canadians are going to have to live with the consequences of Justin Trudeau's fiscal recklessness, whether they want to or not. Otherwise, they're terrorists. But at the same time, you've got to wonder, since we're speaking of terrorism, what happened to the actual terrorists? Those do exist. How is Justin Trudeau treating them? Well, let's see. A few years ago, Justin Trudeau gave more than $10 million in taxpayer money in a settlement to a self-described al-Qaeda soldier called Omar Khadr. Khadr murdered a U.S. Army sergeant. Now, murdering a U.S. Army sergeant is bad, but it's not as bad as criticizing Justin Trudeau. So Trudeau did not freeze Khadr's bank account. Instead, he just made him rich and moved on. When anti-Christian arsonists burned more than 50 Catholic churches across Canada, Justin Trudeau did not declare an emergency. Instead, he issued a statement sympathizing with them. Quote, "It is fully understandable," Trudeau said, "given the shameful history we're all becoming more aware of." You're beginning to see how this works? In a dictatorship, the only real crime is opposing the regime. Are there any civil libertarians left in this country? Old-fashioned liberals, anyone? What do they think of this? Maybe they don't notice it. In their defense, it's hard to notice sometimes with leaders like Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau. They don't look very threatening. They're not the Hollywood version of fascist. Look at Justin Trudeau. He's absurd. The 70s haircut, all those little outfits for when he feels like playing dress up. He doesn't look dangerous. He looks ridiculous. But maybe Justin Trudeau is smarter than he looks. Leaders like Biden and Trudeau avoid the usual tells. They don't use armies to invade other countries, for example. Instead, they promote color revolutions and control foreign governments from afar. That's exactly what they did in Ukraine, which became a far more repressive place once Joe Biden began running it. And he does run Ukraine, make no mistake. That's what they do. This new class of dictators seizes power incrementally through the bureaucracy. They never raise their voices. They don't wave their arms. They smile and they tell you they're protecting democracy and public health. They praise diversity, even as they demand conformity. They're entirely passive-aggressive, but they're no less dangerous. One morning you wake up and they've canceled your job and seized your bank account for the crime of disagreeing with them. This is the architecture of tyranny, and it's not just happening in Canada, it's happening here in the United States. It will be used against us. Bet on it.
Okay, so far I've spent a lot of time just talking about the Freedom Convoy and, you know, what it was, what happened, and the invoking of the Emergencies Act. But, of course, why we need to understand the most important thing, which is why are these truckers protesting? Why can't they just get vaccinated? Now, by the way, for the record, I am double vaccinated, so before anyone goes around saying, oh, you're just anti-vax, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm double vaccinated, but yet I actually got COVID just a couple of weeks ago, so yeah, I'm not sure how much that works. But anyways, yeah, you can't call me an anti-vax. But the thing is, why in the world would someone not want to get the vaccine? It's just because they hate vaccines? No. The reason is because COVID-19 literally has a survival rate of, again, and I mentioned this before, but you know, we always have to go back to statistics. Age 70 plus, 94.6% survival rate. Ages 50 to 69, 99.5% survival rate. Ages 20 to 49, 99.98% survival rate. And I am 19, so age 0 to 19, 99.997% survival rate. Wow, guys. Yeah, this sure is the Black Death. This sure is the Spanish flu. This disease that barely kills anyone. Yeah, for like 5 million deaths worldwide after 2 years. This sure is the end of the world. And of course, that is one reason, but the other reason is because of the constantly shifting and never-ending changes to the whole COVID situation. Remember, guys, when this all started, 2 weeks to flatten the curve? Oh yeah, now it's been 2 years, and we haven't flattened the curve at all. And the fact is that COVID is just going to be part of our lives, and it is just going to be another thing we have to deal with, like the flu. But of course, instead of looking at countries like Sweden, which successfully implemented herd immunity, instead we're going to try the ridiculous thing of trying to get zero COVID, even though it hasn't worked in any country, even in authoritarian countries like China. And so yeah, there we have it. This COVID stuff that doesn't work, of course, is not even much of a threat to begin with. But apart from that, the lockdowns and mandates, none of this stuff even works. And then not to even mention the fact that the world leaders, including this very man right here, Justin Trudeau, don't even follow their own rules. And if you want another example, I mean, the Super Bowl 2 days ago is another great example. All the celebrities there weren't ever wearing their mask during the entire time, and yet we, the plebs, were supposed to be wearing the mask. So it's absolutely ridiculous, it's hypocritical, and it's not based on any science. So before anyone comes into the comments to be like, oh, you just don't follow the science, it's like, no, we have the science on our side, and you don't, because the science proves that this is not even that big of a deal. Anyways, of course, you know, there's so much more that I could say about this, but this video is probably getting too long anyways. But to conclude, here's the truth. First of all, the truckers did nothing wrong apart from, you know, desecrating some of the memorials and statues. That's not a good thing. But apart from that, they are fighting for a good cause. There's nothing wrong in wanting freedom and in not wanting the government to force you to take a vaccine for something that for the majority of people has over a 99.5% chance of survival. This is absolutely ridiculous. Justin Trudeau, of course, is a coward running away, and already that's shameful enough, but the fact that he is now using this to essentially become a dictator is what is really worrying. Guys, mark my word, this is a very important day in Canadian history. Of course, there is, and I really hope that, you know, the emergency will come to an end, but as we all know, never let a good emergency go to waste, and this has been the playbook of dictators all around the world for so many decades, centuries even. And so make no mistake that this is just an attempt to use a power grab, and this is why it is more important than ever to stand for freedom. Now, I myself am from Ottawa, but I'm not in Ottawa right now, so no, I am not at the protest. I can't do anything about the protest. Of course, the only other recommendation I would really say is, of course, vote this guy out. I made 3 videos specifically about that, but at the same time, I'm not very sure that voting will work because, again, you couldn't vote the Austrian painter out. And, of course, although I'm not going to say that Justin Trudeau is going to end up like him, at the same time, once a dictator has power, you probably aren't going to just be able to vote him out that easily. And of course, with the opposition being essentially the same, even if we do get rid of Justin Trudeau, we could have another Liberal, we could have an NDP, we would have a Conservative Prime Minister, and they would probably all do the same thing. But the main thing, guys, is think for yourself, look at the statistics, look at the science, support freedom, and most of all, don't let these people just take away your rights without fighting for it. Of course, I am not saying to ever go do anything violent, and I'm not even saying you necessarily should go to the protests, because after all, at this point they might be arresting people, so it's probably better not to be there. But I do fully support these people because, as the noted terrorist, some guy called, what's his name? Oh, Gandhi, right? He said that when the government becomes, I think something along the lines of, when the government is corrupt or evil, it becomes your duty to stand up against it. And if there's any time to stand up against the government, it is right now. So of course, guys, God bless you. You know, stay informed, and hopefully I'll be making more videos, but you know, I'll just see how this situation keeps going on. So of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, share. I'll see you next time.